Done. You should be able to see my screen now. All right, so we're going to go through strategic human resource management, which is the Unit 6. And I'm going to take you through learning outcome number 1, wherein we're going to explain how you understand the role and importance of human resource management in achieving organizational effectiveness. Am I audible clearly to you?
Yeah, you are clear, Lloyd.
All right, perfect. So what we're going to do is firstly, again, talk about how strategic human resource is important, how it helps in organization's development, and how I previously showed you in the last learning outcome, how it aligns with the organization's strategic goals. And because it's aligning with the strategic goals, the strategic human resource management, whatever decisions they take, and the organizational decisions go hand in hand. So they kind of support each other. You can also say that, they're helping each other to grow. So for example, if the organization decides to, have or be bigger in the next few years, so they might look at, if they are, 20 associates and they want 40 associates, they might look at expanding. So in that 1 year, then again, they're going to look at making sure that they're hiring appropriate people for every month or every year, so that it basically in turns reaches its goals of hiring 20 people in the entire year. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Perfect. What we're going to also go through is a couple of models in this entire unit. So I have some models that we have already previously gone through. Do you remember I was talking about hard HRM and soft HRM?
Yeah.
So some of that part is also going to be mentioned in this lecture over here. So in fact, I can ask you and, question you and just refresh your memory so you have a better idea. And, whatever we learned previously as well, you can just get an idea again of it.
Yeah, of course.
Perfect. So again, how I explained to you before, what strategic human resource management does is it aligns with the development of the organizations and the long-term goals and objectives of the organization. And what it does is it looks at coming up with new HR strategies. For example, if they're looking at retaining their current associates and not want to spend more money or resources on hiring, then they would probably look at, giving them better rewards or, giving them promotions, just making sure that the associates who are working in the organization are satisfied with their job, and also give them some bonus and rewards just to make sure that, they are more motivated into working harder and there's less turnover eventually.
Yeah.
Perfect. Now, we have already spoken about this, what human resource management essentially is. So it essentially helps, if I tell you in a very simple language, every task that the HR department does is indirectly helping the organization in some way or the other. For example, if I give you a very basic example, all right, you're applying for a new job. When you're doing that, HR might interview you. Why are they doing that? So that they're making sure that the right candidate is there for this position. Then they probably would tell you that, all right, I want to have a background check with you. Why do they again do that? So that again, they make sure that in the long run, there's nothing that comes up that, in your previous profiles, your criminal records, they check everything. So that when you're working in the organization, there's nothing in your past that can tie up with that organization, because once you start working for the organization, obviously you're representing that organization, right? So that's why they do that check. Then obviously when they hire you, onboard you, give you training, it's just for the associates to do better their job role, which internally again helps the organization to grow. So everything that they do individually or collectively as well is eventually helping the organization to grow and succeed, and basically pushes the organization to fulfill its goals. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Perfect. And it also,
Yeah.
they monitor your performance, employee performance. They will look at, salary benchmarking. They will look at making sure that you're satisfied with your job role. And if you're not, then how they can come up with, different ways in which they can benefit you and eventually benefiting the organization.
Yeah.
Perfect. I'm going to run you through few features of human resource management. So first of all, I spoke about what strategic human resource management is, where it integrates with the business strategy. It's aligning with the strategic objectives and goals of the business. So they align together and form an alliance eventually to work together to work towards the organization's goals. Now you have current, again, it says how you internally just support all the HR policies and practices and how you make sure that that's going on in the organization. Now you have, again, commitment, which is, again, looking at the organization's mission, vision, values, all of that. I think I mentioned this in the last lecture. It was how people are treated as assets. So I think we read a model which said that there can be two ways in which people are treated. One, they can be seen as assets and really important resources, or one, they can be seen in different organizations as very transferable or changeable. So basically, if there's someone in a specific job role, if an organization sees that person as an asset, it'll make sure that it gives the best, all of the resources, everything that the person needs for it to do their job. But obviously, if there's seen more as just someone who can be changed very easily, then they would not be given that much importance, or that much effort wouldn't be put towards that person. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Perfect. Now, also, what HRM does is it has a unitaristic approach wherein the management and employees are sharing the same interest. So what it eventually does is, for example, if you hire someone on board, they're going to look at making sure that you understand all of the organization's vision and mission, so that you are eventually aligned to the organization and you are motivated towards working towards its goals and missions. So that's where your management, which is the higher level people who make those decisions, as well as the associates, are aligned towards the same interest. And that interest being, it can be that giving the organization or growing the organization, for that working harder, or some organizations have goals that nowadays there is so many people who are being like pro LGBT, so that might be one of the goals of the organization. So there can be various different goals. Obviously those goals are set by the management level and taking the employees' interest in mind as well.
Yeah.
Then line managers that deliver the human resource management. So for HR, for example, if you're in your organization, all right, there might be one manager and there might be 5 associates under that manager. Now, HR might not ask all of their associates or check with all of the associates weekly, but they might have a quick check with, the manager managing those 5 associates and asking, all right, is everything going fine? Or do you need any support? Are everyone in under you, doing fine or better? Anyone's not on too much long-term sick leave, they're doing the job correctly. So they might just take that line manager as a point of contact. But that being said, also, HR might directly contact the associates as well. For example, I gave you an example of stay and exit interviews. So they might have a direct interaction with the associates then. So that's how, there are different features that HRM covers eventually.
Yeah.
Now, again, goals of HRM, we have been through this as well. What do they eventually want? They want their associates to perform well. They want everyone to be committed to their job, motivated into doing better, give out the best results, making sure that in a group they help each other. They, if someone doesn't or struggling with a certain task, I can help that person and vice versa. They look at people who are motivated, very good at what skills they're doing. They have those skills at what their job they're doing. And everyone, or basically all of the associates, should be valued well. So these are few of the goals that HRM puts in place.
Yeah.
Now, again, we've spoken about this. Do you remember what is hard HRM and soft HRM?
Yes. Yes.
Perfect. So I'm just gonna refresh your memory again. So hard HRM. Do you wanna explain me what hard HRM is, Karam?
No, you can explain. Okay, no
It's
problem.
okay. That's fine. So basically, um, hard HRM is not looking at how the associates feel. They might be looking at associates are just, I would say, numbers or figures more like. So they don't see them as, a human emotion behind it. They just see what all resources do they have. For example, I might be really good at Excel. So my
Yes.
employer, if he's using hard HRM, might just see that, all right, how we can use her skills into giving her tasks. So I might be, been piling on tasks without asking if I would be happy to do that job. Maybe I'm good at Excel, but I wouldn't enjoy working with Excel that much. Does that make sense? So that
Yeah,
is
yeah.
hard HRM versus soft HRM is someone who, the management and the associates mutually come to a understanding that I would say that, yes, I'm good at Excel, but, I wouldn't want just Excel focused tasks. You can give me a mix. So maybe mix it with, Excel, talking to people, mix of everything. And I would be more productive while doing that. So these are the versions of HRM when you're seeing the different models as well. You'll understand that each model might be a little different as well. So in few models, they might stick to hard HRM, whereas few models might strictly stick to soft HRM. And then again, there are few associates, few organizations who want to try to make it work for themselves. So they use a mix of both. So they might use a mix of hard and soft HRM approaches. So they might basically say that, all right, you have to do these tasks. Even though you might not enjoy doing Excel that much, you might have to do those tasks. And because obviously there are deadlines that need to be finished. And in the next week, maybe, they come on a compromise. That is a mix of hard and soft HRM eventually. Maybe next
Mm.
week, we might just give you people focused task and not Excel focused. So obviously that varies.
Yeah.
Now I'm just going to explain you the HRM system. I don't know if you remember, but we went through these few models. Do you remember going through these models?
Yes, yes.
So I'm going to quickly run through these models because the second half you have not gone through. I've not taken you through the multiple role model and Tyson and Fell story. This all models you have not gone through, but the up ones I have taken you through them. So just to refresh your memory, I'll take you through these 4 up ones and then 5 up ones, and then we'll explain the rest in detail. So yeah, as I was saying, the HRM system. So there are so many things under human resource management. So they're looking at how to manage, people properly. They're looking at the corporate social responsibility side of things. They might also be looking at learning and development. Oh yeah, it says over here, sorry. They might looking
Yeah.
at learning and development, how to get more new people in the organization if they need, if someone, there are so many things that happen in the organization. People want to voluntarily leave because they might get a job offer somewhere else. There might be people, obviously in a big organization, there might be people looking at maternity leave, people looking at retirement, people looking at, because of some certain health issues not being able to perform. So there are so many things that come under HR that they have to look at as well. And while all of this is happening, they might have to look at hiring or resourcing people as well. So that's another task that HR does. You obviously have managing the pay and, salary benchmarking. And then you're looking at employee relations. So
Yeah.
basically how associates feel in the organization, if they're doing well, talking to them, asking them if they're having any issues, trying to make sure that they have all of the resources for them to do their job properly. And if they're not doing their job properly, one other section of employee resources also, employee relations also includes, putting them on a disciplinary action if they're not doing the job properly, or looking at a performance management plan, PIP, performance improvement plan, sorry. So there are so many things that HR has to deal with is eventually.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to quickly explain you what the Harvard framework is. I know I've gone through this in the previous lectures with you, but just, simply putting it, Harvard framework has 5 parts to it. It has managing all of these things to basically make sure that the organization is also running or moving towards its goals. So you look at stakeholder interests, you look at some situational factors, the basically things that are happening, not just inside, but outside the workplace as well. For example, a new policy or a law has been come up. So, like now in the UK, there's a new policy that's come up that associates can put their flexible working request within the first week of employment. So for example, I am a mother of three kids. All right. I'm not, but just an example. I am a mother of
Yeah,
three
yeah,
kids. Um, I got a new job. And in the first week after working, I feel that, this is getting too stressful for me. And I don't think I would be able to manage this in the long run. So I can basically give
yeah,
a flexible working request saying, and that's legally, I can do that. And legally, the organization would have to give me a logical reasoning behind why would they reject it, or they would have to accept my flexible working request, or just ask or come in a middle ground, like compromise. So for example, if I say that, all right, I've worked for a week, I feel that it's too much pressure. I have three kids and I can't really manage the workload. They might come back to me and saying, all right, we can try to give you, 4 days a week working, maybe take Wednesday off, work Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, and work for
yeah,
longer hours. So instead of 9 to 5, work from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. and cover those hours that you've missed on Wednesday. That's a flexible working request saying that, okay, I have an extra day on Wednesday, for me to take care of my kids because, childcare is expensive and I don't want to do that. So just an idea. So those are the external changes to policies that's happening because government has made that mandatory, right, for employers to basically accept flexible working requests.
yeah, it's nice.
Yeah. So yeah, again, stakeholder interests are people who are working in the organization, or or directly people who are going to be impacted with any decision in the organization. Then obviously situational factors. You have HRM policy choices. So, nowadays all of the organizations, actually, it was just few organizations in the last year, but I think eventually everyone is catching up. They have started, I think I spoke about this last time. Did I speak to you about paternity policy?
Yeah, yeah, maternity and paternity, you already spoken
Yeah.
about
So
this in.
now most of the organizations have started giving, 2 weeks off or a month off to male associates as well when they have a new child, which is a new
Oh,
policy that's put in place. So
very nice.
contractually by the government, 2 weeks is minimum, but I
Mm.
think because employers want to support their associates more, they offer them 4 weeks now.
Yeah, yeah, it's very
And
nice.
you can take 2 weeks together. You can't take more than 2 weeks together. That's the law. So they tell them to break it down then. But yeah, I feel that's a good decision because, it's not just the mother who has a new child, it's the father as well who deals with having a new child, right? He doesn't have good sleep in the night, has to take care of the mother and the child. So I feel that's good. The UK is also having, policies put in place. The government's actually this not yet put in place, like it's not yet decided, but I read about this. They have started with supporting parents who are going through, uh, you know, IVF. And are you aware what IVF is?
No, no, I'm not aware. Could you
That's
please
fine.
explain? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So sometimes parents struggle with having a child, so they might go through a procedure wherein the embryo from the mom is taken and the dad's eggs are taken as well, and they try to fuse those eggs, but that doesn't happen under the inside the mom. It happens, in a lab. And once
Yeah,
they get fused, then they put it back inside the mom.
yeah, yeah.
That's called IVF, essentially, that they try to, make a child. So the government has started, or just thinking, I think it should be put in place by, I would say, May this year. They're trying to basically come up, ask organizations to give those parents some kind of, support as well. Because obviously, even they are going through an entire journey because it's not always successful. Sometimes, they might have to do multiple attempts to make it successful. And that's
Yeah, yeah.
mentally very stressful for the parents because obviously it's disheartening when, they don't have that child that they want. So
Mm-hmm.
I've just heard of one organization already put it into place in the UK. So they have just come up with a policy wherein they are supporting those parents. So for example, if you're going through treatment, or if the fusion is happening this week, you can take a day off for personal reasons and you don't even have to give an explanation. You can just say that, we're going through IVF treatment. So I feel that's also really helpful because, mentally that is very exhausting.
Yeah, yeah,
So
it's
these,
very nice. Yeah, but
yeah.
this technology still is in UK or it's spreading worldwide or like this?
I would say that it is existing worldwide. So anyone who's struggling with having children can use it, but I'm not really sure how much. So I'm
Mm.
aware that in India it's not at all in place. In India, even
Yeah, yeah.
paternity policies are not in place. So
Yes.
even for maternity, they just provide you 6 months after the having
Mm.
after having the child, just 6 months. Whereas in the UK, it's 52 weeks, so a year.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah. And
this all is really interesting to know about new policies, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, it's very nice. Nice to
Definitely.
hear.
Then, HR outcomes again. So as I mentioned, they might be looking at reducing costs, less hiring, making sure that associates retain, they're happy with what they're doing, and having salary benchmarking put in place. So salary benchmarking is essentially a thing that happens everywhere. What they do is they take an associate's salary or pay. For example, your job role is, what's your job role, Kunal?
Yeah, actually, I'm working in HR, but in labor relation,
Okay, so what's
as I
your
spoke
job
in.
title?
The title of my job is like a senior labor relation officer.
Okay, so they might take that job title as Senior Labor Relation Officer, and what they'll do is they will look at organizations that are direct competitors of them. For example, if you're in an organization that is a financial organization, they might look
Yeah,
at similar competitors. Inside their competitors, they might look at these job roles, and then they will look at the salaries of the associates that are working those job roles in those organizations, and they will compare it with your salary.
yeah,
And salary benchmarking eventually is like they come up to a benchmark that maybe the salary for your role would range from 25 to 35,000 pounds, just an example, okay? And
yes,
you have been given 28,000 pounds. So you might be on the lower scale of getting, everyone getting paid. So maybe this year they might look at giving you a percentage as bonus just so you reach that, higher scale, as well as they might look at giving you extra benefits apart from what
yeah,
you're doing at your job.
yeah,
So, extra benefits including a company car, maybe some benefits when you're traveling, work from home benefits, flexible working. There's so many benefits that they can offer as an employer.
yeah,
So that is eventually salary benchmarking, not just looking at just your pay, but also looking at the benefits along with your pay and making sure it's aligning with the other organizations that are going around.
yeah, sure.
Perfect. Now, looking at the long-term consequences as well. So Harvard framework explains that when you're looking at all of these different, outcomes, policies, the interest of stakeholders, looking at external factors that are happening in the organization, you're also looking at how is that going to affect in long term. For example, if you're putting a new policy in place, like I explained, paternity policy, they're going to look at the long-term consequences of it. So if there are 20 associates in the organization, all right? Maybe none of them are, oh, sorry, 10 of them are married now. So long term, you can see that in the next year, maybe, three of them are looking at having a child. In the next year, there are going to be 3 months that these three associates are not going to be there because each associate's going to go away for a month, right? For 4 weeks.
Yeah,
So when they put a policy or a plan in place, they need to see so many different factors that come up along with it as well.
sure.
So that eventually is the Harvard framework. Now I'm gonna
Thank you.
go on the David Guest model of the link between HRM and performance. So you're looking at how human resource management policies and the performance of associates as well, how they come into place. So looking at business strategy, then looking at HR strategy, as it says over here, sorry, how these two strategies basically come up with new HR policies which are effective for the associates because you're looking at the, how employees are working. That's your end goal, right? Your end goal is to push associates to do better. They are committed into doing their job. They're very motivated into doing their job and eventually improving the quality of the goods as well as the productivity in the organization. And
Yeah,
if these two are doing really well, eventually, obviously, overall, the financial performance in the organization is definitely going to go up. Because realistically thinking, if everyone's working towards the same goal and positive, motivated into doing better, eventually the organization is definitely going to have, the financial performance of the organization is definitely going to go higher.
Yeah.
Is that clear now?
Yes, yes.
If you have any questions, just please stop me and I'll just, explain things again or give you better examples so it, you understand better.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm going to talk about the Bath people and performance model. Again, a very simple explanation to this model is there are different sections inside this model. So you're looking at training and development, you're looking at performance management, you're looking at how, the career opportunities of, associates also come into place, and then job security. So this is called the Bath people and performance model because it's focusing on the people in the organization and also how to improve their performance in the organization. So better training and development eventually improves performance.
Yeah.
Performance management, or looking at associates doing their job correctly or managers helping them correctly, again, gonna improve performance. Looking at better career opportunities and job securities, what that does is, if I'm working in an organization that I can see, in the next 2 years, right now I might be an HR administrator, for example. In the next 2 years, I might be, an HR manager or a senior HR manager. That is a career growth in my head. And also, that's also securing me because I feel that my job is secured. And these
Yeah.
two factors play a very important role because these factors motivate their associates into pushing harder. Because if I feel that in the next 2 years, I'm going to, go to be an HR manager, I'm going to push myself to work harder and show everyone around in the organization that I deserve to be an HR manager, right?
Yeah.
So definitely all of those factors play a very important role, and that eventually this model explains.
Yes.
No problem. Now, again, this is talking about how strategic management or strategic human resource management helps or is important to the organization. Everything that we went through eventually, how, it helps in making sure that there are proper opportunities for the people. You're looking at developing your staff, you're looking at managing them, and just making sure that whatever they do is towards the organization's goals. And also,
Yeah.
you're looking at how, because of the actions that the strategic human resource management takes, how is that lining with the organization's goals and how they go hand in hand? So you're working with them simultaneously. For example, if like I give you an example, if you're looking at hiring new people, so the HR strategy is obviously going to be looking at recruitment, looking at making attractive job adverts, giving more benefits. So that obviously changes.
Yeah.
Again, I spoke about what HR does and, what the role of HR function eventually is. So basically, it's to achieve the objectives that have already been set in place and looking at what support you can give to your associates. So those are just some basic aims of the HR function. They also look at obviously employment and development of employees. So that's obviously there, and just making an environment that helps people to use the best of their capabilities or capacities. So obviously pushing the people in doing better, motivating them, making sure that they, just give their best. So, I might be able to do 10 things in a day, but just because I'm not motivated, I might just limit myself to doing 5 tasks. How to make sure that, my manager pushes me. So it can be that, managers, catching up with me weekly, asking me if I'm doing well, asking for updates daily so that she knows or he knows how well I'm doing. So
Yeah.
that's how you make sure that people are using the best of their capabilities eventually.
Sorry, I have one question here. The role of HR, which you explain here that the role of HR, the HR follow the set policy. So I just want to know if the HR department can set the roles or only follow the set policy only.
No, so HR comes up with policies as well.
Mm.
So HR eventually are people, or who work with people, are
Mm.
people who are trained to work with people.
Yeah.
So for example, I worked in an organization. We had set a dress code policy back then. It was, I think, a year and a half ago where I was working. We had a section in the organization wherein all of the associates were working in the call center department. So because that happened, all of them were coming in hoodies, joggers, track pants. So to obviously make sure that that changes, we came up with a policy, which was the dress code policy. That was decided by HR, and the feedback was given by the managers, because all of the managers were like, this is what's happening currently. Because of that, the image of the organization obviously is getting tattered as well. What can we do to make sure that this doesn't happen?
So my mean is that HR don't accept only the set policy. They can also amend or change the policy as well by
Definitely.
the management. Yeah.
Definitely. So for example, I'll give you an example what happens in the UK. Yeah? So there are policies that have been put in place already by the government as well, or we don't call it policies, we call it laws, because they are laws that are put in place. For example, there's a law that you have to give a minimum of these many weeks of maternity leave to an associate who's pregnant. That's something you can't discriminate on, because if they do, the associate can go to court and actually take it up, right? That's a law put in place by an associate. For example, if an associate is leaving the organization, there's a law put in place that you have to have them for a minimum of a week and then let them go. You can't just be like, all right, you have to go now. So that's a law put in place by the government. What organizations do is they take that laws, they're like, all right, you have a minimum of 1 week that the associate has to be after they've put in their resignation. They push it to probably 4 weeks. Why? It's a transition process. They might have to give a notice of 4 weeks just because, it helps the organization. That person can also train someone who's new coming in. So that's a policy put in place by the organization. Now, what HR does is it might amend, make changes to the policy, come up with new policies if required. For example, the dress code policy. Obviously, the government doesn't have any law in terms of how to dress when you're coming into work, but every organization might want to put a policy in place. Just because, it's a financial organization, you can't just walk in a hoodie. It obviously doesn't look good to the stakeholders outside. Does that clear your doubt now?
So
Perfect. That's perfect. Now, how HR helps the line managers and also helps, the organization. So there's just a few mandates that come up. For example, they partner with the senior and line managers to also execute the strategy, as I mentioned, the dress code policy. Now, obviously, HR is not working in the call center section, right? They wouldn't know how does that look. So they got that feedback from the senior and line managers. They took that feedback on board and they decided, all right, this is the feedback that we received, how to tackle or, make changes to this or overcome this problem. That's how they came up with that policy. Now, again, obviously, HR is organized and the way they execute things has to be correctly. They have to support their associates. So if any queries, suggestions, feedback, or for example, if an associate is working in the marketing department in an organization, all right, just an example, they might feel that, they are not able to work that well with their manager just because, it's just not working out. Just, anything can happen. They might come and report it to HR. That is feedback that HR takes on board. And it might give that feedback to the manager and be like, you know what, you should have catch-ups weekly with your associates. You need to tell them, the tasks they need to do. Just an example, that's how they support their employees and associates as well. Perfect. And again, it's an agent for continuous transformation. So for example, if an organization is looking at developing or growing in the next 1 year, they're looking at hiring 20 associates. So continuously, how HR puts things in place so that recruitment happens. So for example, in the 12 months, they might be looking at hiring at least 2 associates monthly so that they know that at the end of the year, they've hit that hiring target that was decided, and also eventually hitting the organization's goals, which is looking at growing, double the amount that they were before. Perfect. Now there are so in HR, there might be different roles that it's divided into. So as I mentioned, there is someone called as HR business partner. So what happens is that, if I'll give you an example of a bigger organization now.
Yeah,
In that organization, there are probably 7, 8 different divisions. There might be a marketing division, a sales division, finance. There are so many sectors that are in that organization. What happens is that HR aligns 1 or 2 business partners depending on, the size of each department. And, there might be like, for example, me, I would be the finance business partner, right? I am mainly looking at every issue that happens in the finance department. All of the associates that have any queries, suggestions, or any feedback for, the managers or any problems, they might just come to me because I am the business partner or HRBP, HR business partner. I am that for that specific department. Any queries that managers have, anything related to policy, leaves, sick leaves, everything comes to me. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, but I have one question here
Go on,
about
ask.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, please. A business partner, as you
Yeah.
spoke that if you are business partner with finance,
Yeah.
so for this purpose, you must have the background of finance, or you can come up with any background and work as BP in finance, if even you don't aware about this finance procedures.
So what happens is that they would prefer people who are familiar with that background, just because those
Yeah,
associates would be able to understand the working of that department much better. For example, for
yeah,
me, I have a bachelor's degree in finance, and then I have a
yeah,
master's in human resources. So I would be the ideal candidate to work for the finance business partner role, because I understand, the working of the financial department, how stressful it
yeah,
is, or how they need to get things done, or, the functioning of it. And then I can give them proper guidance and give an HR perspective. But
yeah,
again, it can vary because, for example, if you are the marketing business partner, all right, and you might not have a previous background in marketing, but
yeah,
you do understand how the marketing departments in your organization that you're working for functions. That's all you
yeah,
need. You don't need to know how they do their job, because that's not your job. Your job is making sure or managing them. They're doing all their tasks that they need to do. They're making sure they're hitting their targets. And, you need to, as a HR business partner, answer the queries which you are doing. So then you obviously don't need a background in it. It's obviously helpful, but it's not needed.
yeah. But you must have awareness about this procedure or about
Definitely.
this. Yeah, yeah. Okay,
Definitely.
thank you.
For example, if you're the HR business partner of the IT department, yeah, and you have to hire someone for that department, okay? When you
Yeah,
conduct the interview, you might not know what agile is, what SaaS enterprise is. All of these are IT terminologies, right?
yeah,
We don't even know how they function or work. So obviously, when
yeah,
you're
yeah,
doing that, it gets a little difficult, because if you're hiring someone new and they, tell all of these words, you don't really know what they mean, or if it has any meaning to it or not. So
yeah,
that's when it gets a little tricky.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, okay, understood.
Perfect. So yeah, there are different roles. There can be a strategist, which basically makes sure that you're deciding all the long-term issues. It says innovator, internal consultant, and monitor. It also actually, realistically, if I explain to you, it's going to be divided into talent acquisition, HR business partners, HR employment law professionals. You have the operations team of HR, and you have the salary benchmarking team. So, yeah, and payroll. All right. So, as I mentioned to you,
Yeah,
different, I'll tell you what they do. Talent acquisition deals with talent. So, you're looking at anyone that's getting hired, new people, or just making sure that everyone you've hired retains in the organization. That's talent acquisition's job. All right. Eventually,
yeah,
just looking at recruitment.
yeah,
Payroll, obviously self-explanatory, looking at getting monthly payments down to the associates. What else did I mention? HR business partners, I explained to you. HR employment law people, what they do is they look at the employment law. So, as I mentioned, government comes up with certain laws. They look at
yeah,
the HR policies that are in the organization that are aligning with those government laws as well. Like I mentioned to you, it's lawfully required, like the government has lawfully put in place that you have to give a minimum statutory requirement of, um, you know, I think it's 46 weeks to someone who is going through maternity. And you also need to make sure that you pay them as well. So for that as well, government has put certain statutory requirements in place. So I think a
mm,
weekly allowance, how much you minimum need to pay them, is given by the government. So for example, some organizations, what they do is, if you're going on maternity leave for say 52 weeks, yeah, half of that time, so half year, they might pay you full of your salary, and the next half they might pay you 50%, because the law tells you that there's a minimum amount that's given that you have to give your associates, even though their salary might be, less than that, you still have to give it to them. So that's how organizations balance that out. So that's done by the employment law specialist. Then I mentioned to you a group that's dealing with salary benchmarking. So again, I told you what salary benchmarking was and how they deal with that. HR operations might look at, looking at paperwork for anyone new that's hired, looking at, their visa rules, everything is in place, making sure they have all of the employee files that's required because they have to store data confidentially, making sure that, for example, any queries that associates have, if, you have a health benefit like, um, free dental care or free eye checkup, that's what they would do. That's all the things that they would deal with. So realistically, these are the different sectors in which HR would be divided in a bigger organization.
Here you mentioned internal consultant analyzing and diagnosing problems of proposing solutions.
Yes.
So this internal consultant, could you please give one example? Which type of problems they diagnose? And because HR mainly diagnosing all HR problems and resolving the problems like any responsibility which they have. So they are dealing some special problem. Which kind of problems internal consultant is dealing?
So if I come with an example that I already previously gave to you, yeah, one of the problems was that people are coming up in hoodies. Yeah. They came up with a dress code policy. That's one problem that they recognized and gave a solution. Now, there might be conflicts between associates as well. For example, two associates might not be able to function together in one department. Sometimes that happens, in big organization that happens more often. So again, how you analyze that, a simple example would be putting them in different departments. But again, looking at the skill sets they have, would they even function in those departments that you put them in? Or, just making sure that they sit separately. Like simple solutions that they come up with would also be diagnosing a problem and then giving a specific solution to it.
So there is any specific problems or any type of problem in the organization internal consultant can deal?
So if I give you, all right, I'll give you a very simple example again. One of the organizations or one of the departments in the organization, all right, they are seeing that there are too many people who are falling sick or going on sick leave. And for example, in the UK, what happens is if you want to go on sick leave, you can just get a doctor's note, signing you off from this date to this date, and your employer lawfully or, statutory, that's what, the words they use, because that's given by the government. So government puts certain laws in place. So statutorily, if your associate has a document from your doctor or your GP that we call it over here, they have to be on sick leave and the organization has to pay them for those sick leaves. Now, that is one of the problems that they diagnosed, that probably in this department, there are so many people that are going off sick and going long-term sick. So short-term sick, obviously, is someone who's sick for less than 7 days. Long-term sick is anyone who's, sick for more than 7 days and beyond that. How they see is that, all right, this is the problem. This department is the only one that's happening. Maybe associates have an issue with their manager. Maybe associates, don't like the way that department eventually functions or the workload in that department. You need to go and diagnose that problem. So that's when I mentioned to you that sometimes organizations also conduct stay interviews. So basically interviews with associates that are already in the organization, asking them how they feel, what can change, why are they, why is this certainly happening, questions like that, and how basically they can make improvements to that certain department and put them in place. So that again would be looking at a problem, coming up with a solution, talking to associates, asking them what the issue is. They might give you some feedback, might have a problem with the manager, or might have a problem with the functioning of the department. They might feel that, they have to take 10 approvals before they do any specific task. That's diagnosing the problem and then proposing different solutions. Does that give you an example?
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Definitely. All right, perfect. Thank you. Again, these are just some general remarks that are there. We're just going to go through the strategies again now. So as I mentioned to you, what is HR strategic role? They come up with new HR strategies as well, like I gave you an example previously, and then they contribute to the development of the strategies that are put in place by the business already. So for example, one of the goals of the business is to grow by 10%. How can HR make sure that proper learning and development is done of their associates? How can they make sure that your current associates are developing and also committed to the organization? And that is them making sure that if your associates are functioning properly, they are going to be motivated, they are going to push through, they are going to basically move towards the goals that are set in place by the business. And then again, as we
Yeah.
spoke about this as well, it works with line managers to make sure that you support, you know, their associates as well as understand what the problems that are coming firsthand from the managers are, and then again from the associates are. Does
Yeah.
this make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It's okay.
Perfect. We already spoke about this. We spoke about the Harvard framework. So you know what the Harvard framework was. Just going to take you up. This was the Harvard framework. It has 5 sections to it. Again, looking at stakeholder interests, situational factors, different HR and policies, the outcomes of those policies, and as well as the long-term consequences of it. So we spoke about the Harvard framework. I'm going to take you through the next model now, which is the Ulrich's multiple role model. So what they do is they come up with 4 different potentials for HR managers, other than just the basics, which is recruiting, training, and motivating. What they think they come up with, how as an HR role, what you need to focus on is look at the strategic focus and then look at the operational focus as well. So looking at not just the strategic changes, agents, partners, but also looking at how employees can be the champions, how they're looking at employees as assets instead of just seeing them as numbers, and how the administrative part, or the expertise goes behind that as well. And then you looking at the process that's already put in place and focusing that with people. So that's why it's divided into 4 different sections like that. Or, it says the horizontal axis focuses on this, whereas the vertical axis focuses on that. It's just simpler when you see the image over here. Can you see these 4 processes here and these arrows
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
are there?
Yeah.
Perfect. Now, obviously, we spoke how these 2 axes, or the straight axis, obviously horizontal and then vertical, how they're focusing on the 4 different qualities or aims. So you're looking at the strategic partner, change agent. You're looking at the employee being the champion and then the administrative expert. I've gone through all these bits with you just up in the slides, so you understand what each different role is and how they function with HR together as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's fine. Now, again, how can HR make an impact on performance? So when I say this without reading the slide, can you give me some examples of how HR makes an impact on performance, Karam?
How HR can make an impact on performance?
Yeah, employee performance.
Yeah, actually, employee performance, the HR impact on this one, because they play a vital role for the performance. Like this, they review the what we can say that the talent of the employees,
Yeah,
and they advise them the trainings and like certification as they needed to improve the knowledge and the
yeah,
quality of employees.
yeah.
So they can through learning and development, so they
Mm-hmm.
impact on the performance of the employees and laborers as well.
Definitely. So obviously, as you mentioned, learning and development. So not
Yeah.
just learning and development, but
Yeah.
looking at their associates getting proper training, making
Yeah.
sure they have all the resources they need to do their job,
Yeah.
looking at the
Yeah.
skill sets of the associates. So
Yeah.
looking at all of that and how that impacts their performance. So,
Yeah.
for example, you're already working in the organization, and if they want to make sure that you retain and improve your performance, they might look
Yeah.
at giving you a little bonus or a reward. That might be an incentive for you to work harder.
Yeah.
So all of these factors affect performance.
Yeah.
How they measure performance as well. for example, you were supposed to do 10 tasks this week, you've done 8, so you have hit the 80% mark. So all of that is done as well. And
Yes.
just support from your manager can also help you. So giving that, making sure your managers give you that is also how HR can help with managing performance.
Yeah.
Perfect. Now I'm going to take you through models, which are really, really straightforward, wouldn't spend a lot of time. The above models were more important, so that's why I spend more time on that. These ones are quite straightforward and smaller, I would say, and
Yeah.
very easy to understand. So, for example, the Tyson and Fell model, it says that apart from different people that are put in HR, for Tyson and Fell, they felt that there were just 3 types of people working. So obviously there are clerks of work, there are contracts manager and architects. So clerks of works are basically people who focus largely on administration, putting policies in place, very ad hoc with their work, basically as it comes and goes. Whereas contracts manager would be someone who is good with systems, much more professional. It's not a creative role because it's a contract which looking at same things again and again or reading tasks again and again. And then you have the architect, wherein there are people who put those policies in place. You have them looking at the long-term picture or keeping that in mind as well, and making sure that HR planning is done, keeping those goals in mind. So those are eventually the architects, or these people come up with new policies, new plans in place, how to, motivate associates. So those people are called the architects. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I told
So,
you
but
it's,
but
yeah, go
here,
on.
this people, these all 3 type of peoples are part of HR or HR.
Yeah.
What I don't understand this one
Yeah, this model
because
is based on HR itself.
yeah.
So in HR, they say that there are 3 types of people. I
Mhm.
gave you a realistic example already on how many different departments it's divided into, right? But
Mhm.
for this model, they feel that it's divided into 3 types of people.
Mhm.
Few people in HR are just looking at day-to-day activities as tasks come and go. Few are just looking at
Mhm.
reading
Okay.
or going through everything that's gone. And again, these people come up with
Mhm.
new policies or take new suggestions on board and contribute to the business eventually.
Okay. They just explain the HR with these 3 designations.
Yeah, this model explains it. So there might be organizations that might use this model and just have these 3 designations,
What else?
or there might be an organization, as I explained to you previously, and have a much bigger HR team.
Yeah. Okay. This is
So
Tyson and Fell model.
yeah, this is the Tyson and Fell model.
Mhm.
Now we're going to
Okay.
go through the story model. Again, inside HR, how it functions, it's a model. I'm just aware of the time. How many slides do we have? We have a couple of bits to go through, but these models are quite easy. So it's just 2 more models, and I think you should understand them. So this model, what it does is it divides HRM into different sections or parts.
Yeah.
It's strategic, then it's tactical. We spoke about strategic HRM mainly. Then it's non-inventory and it's inventory. So all of these different change makers have different jobs or roles that they do. So
Yeah.
change makers, which are people who, come up with new ideas, policies, look at different HR models. You have your advisors, who are your internal consultants or people who might help you. For example, the employment law associates that I spoke about, that might give you an example for advisors. You have regulators, or basically people who put those policies in place. So obviously now you have decided what the policy is, but you need to make sure it's implemented properly as well. So doing that is the regulator's job. And then you have handmaidens, which are more like, I would say, and it might be controversial, but I would say they are more like HR business partners, because that they are the link between the HR department and and, for example, the finance department. So they make sure that whatever the line managers ask for, need, or whatever is going in that department, they are supporting that department eventually. So they might be called as the handmaidens. Is this clear to you?
Yeah.
Perfect. Sorry, Miss. Yeah. So you have Riley's model now, which again explains that there are different sections or parts it's divided into. So you might, again, over here, you have strategic, you have contribution, tactical, time orientation. So how they see that the role of the HR practitioner changes as well. So you might have people in the start looking at the administrative role. For example, in small organizations, they might just have few people in their HR team, all right? The same team might conduct interviews. The same team might looking at the administrative side of stuff or paperwork side of stuff. The same team might look at putting policies in place, coming up with new policies. So how that changes, so how they go from looking at administrative work into being an innovator and coming up with new policies as well. This is how it explains the changing role of how the HR people work as well. This is just a very simple model again. Then we're going to talk about Cadwell's model, which talks about how there are again 4 different types of people. You have change champions who basically look at making strategic changes, focus on what the goals of the organization is and how we can align to those goals. Then you have change adapters who basically look at the vision, mission, and then make sure that change is put in place. You have your change consultants, which look at how that HR change can be initiated or how it can how can the higher levels in the organization or the management level of the organization approve those changes as well or initiate those changes as well. And then you have synergists who eventually look at different projects across the entire department and how this one policy or change can affect all of the different departments.
Yeah.
So there are 4 different types, again, it explained in Cadwell's model. Now, for the competency framework, again, we have gone through all of these bits. We speak about how HR understands the business and culture awareness. So if HR doesn't understand what the business wants or the goals of the business, it's obviously not going to come up with specific policies and good, ideas to basically be or motivate their associates to work towards the organization's goals. So they have to be culturally and, they have to be aware of the business. Then you have the strategic capability wherein you not just put in strategies in place or business strategies in place, but you also put HR strategies in place. Like I gave you an example of hiring. So how, as an HR strategy, they might focus on hiring more associates monthly to reach the goal at the end of the year. Then again, organizational effectiveness, how that helps in the contribution of planning and, putting things in place or implementation in the organization. How HR decisions basically are put in place in the organization. Then you have internal consultancy, which again, how the HRBPs, they take suggestions from the line managers and then use that or consult with them to put practices in place. That would be an internal consultant. Then you have delivery service and you have continuous professional development. So continuous professional development, obviously, as I mentioned to you previously, looking at all associates are developing, proper training is done, they're given proper opportunities to grow. That would be one of the continuous development sections that HR should have. And service delivery is quite straightforward because basically they are giving all of the HR services that's required in that specific section or area. Does this make sense to you?
Yeah.
All right. If you have
Sure.
any doubts, just please feel free to ask me. All right. I know we are up with time. I just need to go through few more slides, and these are the bits that we have already gone through. I don't know if you remember these bits. So this should be quite straightforward, and this covers learning outcome point 1.3. That's why I just want to run you through them before we get done with the lectures. So you have the strategic HRM. Sorry, did I? Yep. Again, if you have to evaluate the HR function, you look at these certain evaluating factors. And also there are different ways in which you can make sure that there are not just evaluating them, but making sure that those new policies or practices that they have come up with is quite clear why they want to do that. And you can look at 10 ways of ensuring that they are going to be effective in the long run.
Yeah.
Perfect. Now you already know what strategic HRM is, eventually meaning that the HR strategies align with the organization strategies and go hand in hand. I've already explained you this model. We went through this up. So again, looking at strategic HRM, looking at the overall HR strategies, and making sure that they are aligned, and then looking at making changes to the strategic choices or not.
Yeah.
So there are different steps that they keep in mind as well. We've gone through this already, that there are different steps that you can put in place for a strategy. First, you need to make sure that you're aware of what the business wants and you understand the business properly. Then you need to make sure you see how HR can add value to it, or basically go hand in hand with the business strategy that's been put in place. Then you see what happens in the long run or in the future and how they can make changes. And then you obviously need to make sure that the business agrees with those changes as well. And then you
Yeah.
put those practices in place by management.
Sure.
Again, you have HR strategies that are put in place. So you have different areas that they look at into putting different strategies and policies in place, and how
Yeah.
it can advantage the business in the long run. Again, that's the main goal in the end, right?
Sure.
So yeah, we are actually at the end of the lecture because these are just some basic examples of the strategies. Unless you
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
any questions or doubts.
No, no, it's okay. Very nice. I pick all the questions.
Perfect. If you again have any questions or doubts, you can ask them in the next lecture as well. You can go through this presentation. And if you feel you have any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them.
Yeah, sure.
And no, thank you so much for your time today, Karam. I'll see you next week again. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe tomorrow you will see me.
We don't have a
Saturday.
lecture scheduled.
Okay. Okay, no problem. It's
All right.
full as per administrator, no problem.
No problem. Yeah, Aman has sent you the links. So you have a session at 1 to 3, 1 to 2 only, UK time. So
Yeah,
it'll be the same timing, but the next sessions are next Friday, Saturday, and then next Friday, Saturday again. But if you're free and you need some sessions in the middle, then you can get in touch with me. I'll ask Aman if we can, put some in place.
sure. I
Definitely.
will
All right.
keep in touch with you.
Perfect. Do that, Karam. Thank you. Thank you for your time today. Take care. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye.